Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. Today, for the first time, I'm gonna be speaking with you on the camera, so you might see who are you speaking with in the first place, who is talking to you. So bear with me as I'm experimenting. Little background about this. So a few of my friends, some of you as well, have mentioned that it might be worthy to start recording videos as well, to have the face to the sound of the voice that I've been emitting for the past 2 years. And I must say, it's something different for me, something new. I might be blushing at times, I might be stumbling at times. That's going to happen. So I hope that you can hear me clearly and that you don't mind the background of my room. And without further ado, we're going to start. So it's been a while since I've been here. And this time round, as I mentioned, I've prepared for you a series of 10 books that I will review. These are not the reviews that maybe you're looking for if you want to get a full scope of the book, right? So the way I do my reviews is basically I'll talk a little bit about the book. I'll talk about the author's other creations. And if I know more about the author, I will also provide you with that information. But more or less, I want to give you a taster of what the book is about. And if you like it, then I would encourage you to try it out. So I'll put in the description under the episode, of course, all the links to the book of the author as well as their other works. And if any other links are needed, I will add them as well. So I hope that that will allow you to check whether or not this is something for you. Okay? And it's worth to note, as always, that if you'd like to support my podcast so I can get into a normal studio rather than my room, or if you just want to buy me a coffee because you feel like whatever I'm contributing to your life is valuable, although I have stopped drinking coffee at the moment, you can definitely buy me a cup of orange juice. So feel free to send some funds onto my PayPal account, right? Thank you so much for that. And let's start. So today, for the first book in our series of 10, or maybe 11, we'll see. It's a bit unpredictable, right? I would like to talk about the book by Yuval Noah Harari, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And first and foremost, why do I want to talk about this book? The funny thing is, I've read it twice at this point, which is unexpected considering how big that book is. And that is why I've been talking about it with my friends recently, two of my very good friends. And we've ended up reading it together and then discussing it afterwards. So I have fairly fresh understanding of it. And of course, I will not be quoting everything. I will just give you some touches. So when it comes to the book overall, I, as a history freak and definitely an amateur of humankind in terms of where we come from, where are we going, a little bit of more interest in what is life about as well and what it used to be about, if anything different. And I found it very interesting, right? It's a very in-depth analysis. It is not academic at all. So it's not a book that you have to be, after 2 masters and a PhD degree to understand. I think it's written in a fairly understanding and easy manner for an average reader. And of course, there is an option of an audible version. So the first time round when I read it, I believe I read half of it on paper and then I switched to Audible. So that's why I have a copy back home of the paper version. And then the second time round, I literally just listened to it. And I know that some people might be distracted when listening to books, but similarly, as you're listening to me right now, and possibly you're not that distracted, maybe you're doing something monotonous enough to allow yourself to hear me as well. I find it very, very helpful, the audiobooks, right? So if you do believe that maybe the book is too big for you to like carry around and read on the underground or whatever, then definitely get yourself an audiobook of that. And it might be also more helpful if, if you're just a bit, how would you call it? um, taken aback when looking at such a big book as a Bible, for example, because it's a big book, right? So some people just shudder for the thought of picking it up and starting reading, whereas an audiobook, you can see how many hours are there, but you don't really see the hours visually. So when it comes to the facts and the figures that Mr. Harari points in the book, I found it very, very interesting and informative, even though I do not, as I mentioned, hold any degree in history. I do have quite an extensive knowledge of history from primary and secondary school because we had quite good teaching of that back in Poland. But for the most part, still, it's a book that anyone who even, I even took a note here, even if you did not like history at school, you'll probably enjoy reading, where you came from and where, when, how did we come from, and also potentially what are the different implications of that. And I'll come back to this later. So the fun thing about the book for me, the most important factor for me that I would encourage anyone to explore, is that the book actually covers many topics that comprise this idea of being human, but in a way that they are like an introduction. At some point there is a full topic about money and how money works. At some point there is a full chapter about biology, about culture. Culture and history are interlinked throughout the whole book. And what I mean is that there are philosophy, for example. There are chapters and stages at the book which allow us to maybe, even if you've never read about money, or you don't even, you've never thought what money is or how do you define money. And I'm not meaning like the cash that you hold in your wallet, rather money as the concept itself. I think it's a great introduction to that. And because of it, it's also interesting just as a book to trigger you to go into different directions later on, right? So that's ideally what's going to happen in my mind, what's going to happen for any of you who ends up reading it. You're going to read it and then you're going to see, wow, this chapter about, markets and how they work was really interesting. And then you can follow on some books that either me, the author, or anyone else suggests for you. And then maybe some of you thought like, wow, this archaeology stuff was really, really interesting. Can I somehow explore that more? So I would definitely recommend that from this side, especially if you do not know much about the general history and general culture of humanity. So I have some quotes for you as well that I found really, really profound, and one that is definitely suitable for our times that I wanted to read for you and maybe talk a little bit about it in a moment, is that the world does not revolve around humans or around any other particular group of beings. And when I read that and I highlighted it for myself on the notes on my phone, I thought about it because in a way it's quite an obvious fact, right? Unless you really do believe that as humans are like the most important creature in in the whole universe. As much as I do believe we are quite special, and maybe in a moment I'll go into that, I do think that for the most part we are just another of many creatures, and maybe one tiny one that will, sort of light up, sprout, and at some point wither. This is not what I wish for us. Rather, I do believe that there is a certain order in the chaos of the universe, and And in a way, maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Maybe we're here for a couple of 100,000 or millions years, and then we're gone. And I mean, on a smaller scale, that's what happens, right? And if we follow that on a larger scale, I would not be surprised if that happens to everything. We know, for example, that the sun is burning, and at some point this burning will stop. And at that point, the star will collapse and something else will emerge. So, taking this into account, I think it's quite important, especially reading this book, to have in mind that we are just another, and we are not just humans, but we are definitely another being only. We're not the only being, right? So maybe I'll jump into it straight away about that. The something that popped up to me thinking about that is, in the scriptures and in many religions, there is this idea that we are created in God's image, right? Or we have a piece of God within us, or maybe we are another. I like this image as well, that each of us is like one of the dreams that God is having. The universe is having dreams and is dreaming, and each of us with our adventures is one of those dreams. And I think that's quite poetic and quite profound. But thinking about this and thinking about the God part within us, in the book, of course, there is a part where Mr. Harari talks about what humans came to become, and do, build, create. And I do believe that this is the ability, the ability to conceptualize and bring things to life, in my opinion and my feeling, is what makes us godlike, or is what is this creative part of the universe. And I don't want to impose any belief onto you. And if anything, I'm just offering some idea that might be considered and hopefully will enrich your own ideas. I don't know much, I'm just a person. But this is what stood out for me when I was reading and listening to the book, that maybe the God part within us is this ability to abstractly think and conceptualize, because that is what made us so competitive and what drove other animals pretty much to become our slaves, or disabled them from causing us much harm. And maybe at this point I'll touch on this quote. There is a quote that says, "Long before the Industrial Revolution, Homo sapiens held the record for driving the most species to their extinctions. We are basically great at destroying, but can also create completely new." And that second part is my own words. It's just me sort of answering that quote, because I was thinking about this narrative that is these days quite popular, that we are like the cancer on the earth, that we're destroying the earth, and there is so much bad things about us in terms of, humans being bad for the planet. And I have no doubt there are spaces where we are coming short, and we are overstretching in terms of overusing some resources, abusing some animals. But I found it just quite profound that Mr. Harari points out that even long before the Industrial Revolution, long before the world that we know right now, our species managed to drive to extinction almost every other plant and animal, or at least completely dominated, to the point that you no longer are able to compete with us, right? And maybe there is just something about us like that. And I don't mean there is something malicious about us. Maybe it's just this competitive edge that we've gained by abstractly thinking and perceiving time not only in the presence, but also considering and conceptualizing the future and thinking through what happened in the past, that allows us to be as such. And if so, then maybe it's all as it's supposed to be. There is this Buddhist idea that everything is as it is. And of course, this is not to say that we should not try to make things better or prevent things from becoming worse. But there is some profound peace to be found in the idea that the world is as it is, and it will be as it will be. And maybe if we cannot attend to some of the parts, maybe we should just let them go and focus on what we can do ourselves. And that's what I believe in, at least. And before I continue, this sort of got me to think about our responsibility as a human, right? What is your responsibility towards yourself, towards your family and friends, towards your co-workers, co-uni partners, I don't know, towards your local society and like the community locally and more, and globally, and the world, the animals. And I think it makes sense to me to think that first and foremost, we have to take care of ourselves, not selfishly, rather to make sure that we are well educated, well healthy, well prepared for the world, and to take the burden of our responsibility upon our shoulders and bear it, as Jordan Peterson invites us to. And then once we've carried that cross for ourselves, we can carry it for our family and friends, for our local community, for our extended community, for the world, for the animals. And this is not to say that if you have a chance to help an animal or someone from your extended community while you're working on yourself, you should not help them. Rather, I do believe that if all of us would become better at being good people and good with ourselves, with those around us, the world would be a better place, and there would be much less of the problems that seem to be a global, societal, intercultural, and so on. And maybe the invitation here, like in any other podcast ever, from my side at least, is to consider how can you make yourself a bit better. So coming back to the book, right? Sorry for this little distraction. Something that I've also noted as something very, very interesting is that Mr. Harari points out that nowadays we know more as a collective, as an overall society, the humanity overall seems to know much more than we used to know, for example, in the times when we were just running around, still being living in tribes, for example, and not even having the farms and so on. But on an individual level, an average person knows much less in terms of skills, in terms of useful information. And useful here is probably the keyword than before. So when we used to live in tribes, it was up to every little individual from a very young age to ensure their survival and the survival of the tribe, right? Of course, we had some roles. There were some roles that were more passive and more active in terms of this survival mode, for example. But for the most part, the average human in this tribe had to make sure to know and to pass on as much information to the next generation as quickly as possible, because life was much quicker in terms of much riskier. It was much more in the moment. And I think in the moment is a crucial point here, because if you know that you can wait another year until you learn how to drive, of course they did not drive back there, but it's definitely one of the skills that each of us or most of us wants to possess, then the comfort is there that in a year time you will be able to drive, unless something very, very unlucky happens to you. Whereas for them, it was a matter of, in 2 days you might be dead, because there was so little security. So every day was just priceless in terms of learning those skills. And an interesting other point that Mr. Harari pointed out that really shocked me, and we talked about it with my friends, is that before the agricultural revolution, people used to have much more time to enjoy themselves in terms of doing extracurricular activities other than work and provide food, security, shelter, than after. And this is not to say that agriculture made us with all the work and misery. In a way it did, and for that I would invite you to read the book. But it's just an interesting thing to think about, that let me ask you, how much time do you spend every day working? And how much time every day do you spend consciously doing what you would like to do? And of course, those answers might vary throughout the day, throughout the week. And I have days when I have no time to do anything that I like. I have days that I have plenty of time to do what I like the weekend. Although sometimes I do work on the weekends, and then it turns out that it's also work. And maybe you're one of those blessed people that will say, well, I enjoy and love my work, so I would say that I enjoy myself all the time. And that's great. I definitely, I would just say you're very blessed. And with time, hopefully all of us will be able to do that one way or another. But it is interesting to consider just how much time we spend these days overall, especially if you calculate it, it becomes a quite daunting number of time that we spend working for something that often is not what we want to do. We just do it because we sort of not have a choice. Of course, there's always a choice, but sometimes the choice is not as easy or as obvious as it would seem. So yeah, just a thought there about that. How much do you work? And now finally, before I sort of wrap it all up, I wanted to give you some ideas about that living in the moment. If you've tried meditation, if you've listened to any of teachings instead of in terms of Buddhism or Stoicism as well, if you've read books such as Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, it seems to be that by becoming more present with what is happening, there is a possibility of alleviating more suffering from our lives, because life is suffering from time to time. That's normal, right? We are not here to sugarcoat things, so I don't want to depress you, but I just want to take a note of the fact that you will suffer at some point. I am suffering sometimes as well. Everyone does. And the interesting thing that at some point in the book, Yuval Noah Harari also points out, not necessarily points out as a statement, rather gives a glimpse into thinking about it, is the idea that maybe people who lived before us that had to live much more in the moment were so much more busy about, making sure they have some food, making sure they have shelter, finding a mate, spending time with their family and friends, learning stuff, eating. They were much more in the present than we are. And if you look at animals, that's exactly what they do. It's very difficult then to be depressed. And, I don't want to minuscule the depression as a state. I think that's horrendous, and life sometimes happens such way that it just happens, right? but it does make you wonder whether maybe we could learn something from animals and from those previous generations of ours, that maybe the best way to get over your difficult moments is to be in the moment. And there is an episode I've recorded a long time ago, I think 2 years ago, called Just Be Here Now. I will put a link below as well if you'd like to listen to it. But yeah, that's just an invitation for you to consider, how present are you with your moments? How often do you find your mind wandering to something else? And don't get me wrong, everyone does from time to time allow their mind to wander. I definitely do. And it's not necessarily too great at times. And I'm definitely distracting myself as well from time to time from the things that I do. And that's going to happen. It's just a matter of practice and maybe becoming more aware of it. Because until we see a potential to change or something that is a problem, we cannot really make that change or eliminate that problem, resolve it. So when it comes to the book itself, then finishing it off, I would say it's definitely a book for anyone who's interested in history or culture or anything related to humanities and humanity's story. And it is also a book to anyone who does not consider themselves to be so, but would like to explore that topic just for the fun facts, even if you just want to listen to it so you can understand a little bit more how people used to work and used to live before, how the life used to be 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, And it is a very approachable one. So unless you don't have 10 hours of your time to spare to listen, or you don't have enough power in your arms to carry a book that is probably around 2 kilos, then I would definitely recommend you check it out. And some books that I would like to mention as well from Mr. Harari. One that I've read before is called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, which is really, really interesting. And maybe at some point I'll make a podcast about it. I don't know. But I would definitely recommend as well if you're interested more in what is going on right now rather than the past. And a book that I've just started, and I will also link it below, is Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. It's a sort of a second part to Sapiens. So Sapiens ends in our modern era, somewhere around the time we invent the AI and we start, sort of engaging with AI. And at that point, the book finishes and maybe this next one starts, which is Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. So yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that this new format is something that you like. Please do let me know. Either send me an email or comment below the episode. Try any other means. I have social media as well, so feel free to reach out to me. Now you know my face as well. And hopefully that will also allow you to decide whether or not you still want to listen to it, right? I think there is a huge power in image, and maybe I should have done it earlier. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. I hope that it's something that you enjoy. I wish you a very great week. I will be posting the next episode soon. And please do remember to consider your situation in terms of what we've talked about and maybe consider reading the book. Other than that, thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you're not watching it as you're driving or, doing anything that requires you to maintain gaze at something else. And yeah, I wish you a great week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.